Hello and welcome back to the podcast You're Better Than That, hosted by me, Hannah Miller, joined by my friend Zoe. Hello, Zoe.
Hi, Hannah.
I have got total decision fatigue at the moment. I feel like big decisions and small decisions. We tried to have a meeting, didn't we, yesterday? And today, actually, we've been discussing things which are all about we've got to make a decision on things.
Mm-hmm. And a quick decision.
Yeah, and sometimes your brain just goes into total fog.
Yeah.
When we bought this house that we're sitting in, it was a project and needed huge amount of work doing to it. And I had total decision fatigue at the time. So we painted everywhere white and made it blank and thought we'll do things in the future, because decisions, when they come thick and fast, or when they're really big decisions, can just feel like too much.
Yeah. Some people really hate decisions. Like, you know, when you're in a group and you ask, what do you want to go? Or
where
what
should
do
we
you
go
want
for
to eat?
food?
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
I just can't. You choose.
Yeah.
You choose. Or you do go somewhere for dinner and you choose your dinner and you just look at what somebody else has chosen and wish you were eating that. That is what me. I find. I'm totally envious of another choice and I made a wrong choice. Sometimes it means that this is quite a funny thing to talk about, because obviously we're talking about important decisions, but it does mean then if I go to a restaurant I like, sometimes I will pick what I know I like.
Yeah.
Because
so
then I'm
not
happy that I'm not going to get upset.
Yeah,
I will definitely enjoy this. It will
real.
not let me down. But sometimes when they're big decisions, or even just when we've had loads of decisions to make, or because we're quite tired, decision making can be really hard, can't it?
For sure.
I've just been choosing some new handles for the kitchen. They've arrived today, haven't they?
Good choice.
Big choice. And then when you go on the internet and you think about handles, there's just too much choice. I was also going to buy a drying mat for the new side in the kitchen. Well,
silicone or
or do you go microfiber? Do you go grey? Do you buy a 2-pack? What size do you want it to be? What brand do you want it to be? And all of a sudden I'm like, I don't need 25 drying mat decisions. I just need you to choose one for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where sometimes too much choice and too much opportunity can just mean we don't make any choice.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought it'd be good to talk about decision making today, and how do we, especially not deciding on kitchen handles, but bigger decisions in life. Do I move jobs? Do I do this extra study? Yeah. Do I move house? All those kind of bigger decisions that come out in adult life. And actually a lot of the people who engage in my course are at that point. They're looking for help in a decision. Yeah. So often people come and do the purpose pursuit because they're at a point in life where they're thinking, I need to decide about this. Do I stay as is or do I make a change? What's quite interesting is, I think to even do the course in the first place, you kind of know in your heart you probably need to make a change.
Yeah. And
that's your heart speaking. But people find decision making difficult, and especially the big decisions of life. Some of them can feel more sensible and the right choice, or some of them are more risky. We had a friend round the other night called Ruby, and she was talking about work, and she was talking about some things that she'd quite like to do, but then she said, but realistic Ruby knows that that's not a good idea for now. It made me laugh. It was almost like a little character. Realistic Ruby has to bring about that. So realistic Ruby in our heads and risky Ruby, they are two different sides of a situation. I mean, I can think of some times when I've made sensible choices and times I've made risky ones. Can you think of any decisions you've had to make where there's felt like an element of you've made a risky choice or you've made a sensible choice?
Well, yeah, even just like we really want to travel at some point. Yeah. And some people would tell us, drop everything and just go. And we were like, actually, no, for us, that's not going to work. We need to actually be a bit more organised and plan things. And we chose the option that wasn't risky. So that's and people can put onto you what their perspective is or what's worked for them. Yeah. And there are times to choose the sensible route, and there are times to choose the risky. And do you have an example?
I mean, there are times when I think probably my riskiest decisions have probably come through some of the decisions I've made around work. Like starting a business is a risky decision. It's definitely not the safe route.
Employing people.
Yeah, you're very risky. High risk. You and Laura. I mean, Laura has just disclosed over lunch. What did she say? She said, are chickens mammals? That's what she asked over lunch.
It started off by our eggs dairy.
Yeah, our eggs dairy, our chickens mammals. And then I said, what's a mammal, Laura, who has biology A-level? And she said, mammals have legs. And that was her definition of a mammal. It's not what mammals are, guys. If you're not sure what a mammal is, that is not the definition of a mammal. No, so you are very risky. But yeah, all those things are risky decisions that we take on. But I think sometimes they become riskier in our head than they are. So one of the things I thought we could talk about today, because I know lots of people listening to this will have decisions in front of them. Do I go for that job? Do I leave the job? Do I start the business? Do I move house? Do I get married? Do I leave the country? You know, we've all got our own versions of that. Do I start a family? Do I have another baby? Do I not have another baby? And we can't always choose risky decisions. Like, that would be stupid advice. Yeah. And we can't always choose sensible decisions. Yeah. And annoyingly, as this podcast always seems to be, we're looking for a happy middle in between most things. Mm-hmm. And the extremes out there that just say, follow adventure, do as you please, stupid advice. Stay safe, never take a risk, stupid advice. It's about what's the right thing to do in any given time.
Yeah.
And I thought we could talk about some things we can do to help us get in tune with our decision, and things that we shouldn't do to help us make a decision.
Nice.
So things not to do to help you decide is to get too many opinions.
That's a really good point.
We just did a thing, didn't we, where we were trying to find out whether the course journal for the Purpose Pursuit, should we go A4, should we go A5? So we asked people to poll and tell us what they thought. And essentially, what have we found out? Nothing.
Nothing. It wasn't
Everything's
helpful.
Brexit. Everything's 48-52. That's not helpful, because now we feel none the wiser. But some opinion is helpful. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to be ignorant either. So if we widen the pool of opinion too far, you are not going to make a decision. I think that's really important, because you will have people who love and care about you who will say, don't do it. It's too much of a risk. And there'll be other people who love and care about you who will say equally, go for it. Go for it. And that will be to do with people's own experiences, their appetite for risk. So I think don't go for too many opinions, but don't be ignorant.
Yeah.
And think about, when you're getting those opinions, who's got some good life experience, maybe older than you or been through this, and who has got a similar value set to you. Yeah. That's really important. Mm-hmm. Or who's going to put their own values aside and support you with your own. So I think how not to decide is to get too many opinions. Anything where you start saying, should I wear the pink top or the blue top? You're just going to get some people say pink and some say blue and some say neither of them. I hate them.
And you get even more confused.
You do. And unless you're somebody who's born with a great deal of self-assurance, which I'm assuming these people aren't, because they would have made the decision already if they had it, you're just going to feel more confused and more lacking in confidence. I think another way not to make a decision is to be passive. So sometimes people say things like, well, if it's meant to be for me, it will happen.
Yeah.
The universe will bring it to me, or
what will be,
will be, or if it's what is right for me in my faith, then it will all happen. Whatever version of that you think of. Although I do kind of have a sense of like things happen and we aren't entirely in control of our own destiny, I think being passive is dangerous, because why do we think everything's going to come to us just because it should if we're passive? If I'm a potential concert pianist and I never play my piano anywhere except in the house, is it going to come to me?
Exactly.
If I'm the potential of winning Wimbledon and I only play tennis at Boldmere Tennis Club, is it going to happen?
No.
Exactly. So it's quite unrealistic, naive way to think, but we do it sometimes about things, and it's a way not to make a decision or to put it off, to say, oh, if it will be, it will be.
Exactly.
It's also avoiding disappointment again. It's
That's
all
true.
Doing that is like, oh, if it's meant to be, you're essentially saying, I'm not going to put anything out there because I don't want to face the disappointment. So I'll just think the universe will bring it to me if it's meant to. That doesn't mean that things don't just happen sometimes for us, because they do. We get that email, we get that chance encounter, we get that door open for us because of someone that we know. But we still have to do things, and we have agency. So another way not to make a decision, one is don't be ignorant, one is don't get too many opinions, and another is don't be passive. Another thing not to do is to compare. So if we spend our life comparing other people's decisions or other people's lives or other people's opportunities, again, our decision making is not going to be coming from the most healthy foundation. Yeah. We're comparing to other people's lot or what other people did. That's very different to getting counsel and advice. Comparison is almost like this. It comes from a place of uncertainty and longing and potential like jealousy even or competitiveness. Whereas counsel and advice is, tell me what you've learned, tell me what you've already experienced. Let me share a bit of what you've experienced in your story and see where the principles are that could help someone else.
Would you say, because we have done an episode on comparison and we've spoken about how sometimes it's a good thing, would you say that sometimes it's a good thing in decision making?
Well, if somebody's done things that you can look at and think, well, look, it worked out for them, why not me?
Yeah.
That's a helpful comparison. Or, oh, they did that, they gave that a try, I could give that a go. I just think it's always got to have that caveat of, we're all different people with different personalities, and what somebody does because of who they are won't necessarily work for everybody.
Yeah.
And if we're doing a decision because we feel, well, they did that and it worked out for them and now they live in this big house or they have this dream job, those things are just going to lead us to just directly comparing all the time rather than seeing it as inspirational. So I think that's the difference, really.
Totally.
So those are some things that I think don't help us decide. Now, there are things that we can do that do help us decide. One is to get that knowledge and get that support. And you might have friends in your life, you might have peers, you might have people who are older than you that you can tap into. It's why we create the Purpose Pursuit, because it gives you the knowledge you need and the information on yourself, the time to reflect, to make informed decisions. Nobody's telling you what decision to make, but you're being given the tools to help you make a stronger opinion. I also think one of the things we need to do is gauge the risk.
Sure.
Actually properly gauge the risk. If I leave my job and decide to start a business, what are the actual risks of doing that? Are the risks financial risks? Are the risks reputational risks? How big are those? And I think that for most of us, unless you are very, very naive or very self-assured, we probably make the risks bigger in our head than they actually are.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think really wisely gauging risk is important. I think alongside that then is to then think about, well, if these things happened, what would I do? So let's say you left a career in a certain direction, you went after something else. The worst that could happen is you take a job and you really, really don't like it. But that's really the worst that could happen.
Yeah.
And you've moved across to something and it's no better. So can you handle that? Most people would actually say, oh yeah, it's disappointing, but yeah, I suppose I could handle it. And we almost see it as quite fatalistic that if I do that, it's awful. What about if you start a business and it fails? Is your house staked on it? If it's staked, is that the right word? House staked on it? I think so. Maybe not. If your house isn't staked on it, as in you haven't taken all the money out of your home, it's maybe okay if it fails.
Yeah. And the risk is okay.
Yeah. We have to know what the risk is and decide whether we've got capacity for it, recognizing that we've probably got more capacity for handling something going wrong than we realize, because 100% of the things we've had to handle up until now we've faced.
Do you think there's any room for, if someone has assessed the situation and the risk is very high, still doing it? If they want to. I mean, they've just got to go in with their eyes open. There are times when I've looked at things and I've thought, other people, and I've looked on and thought, I can't believe you're doing that. Like, this is really risky. Are you sure? But ultimately, that person has to make that decision. I mean, people do risky things, not just in the world of work, but what about people who go and decide to solo travel around the world or set off in a sailboat to go from A to B, with a small crew and all the dangers that could come with that. There are lots of really crazy, adventurous things that people do. I'm not sure it's for me to say if it's worth it or it isn't worth it. What's the problem is if you haven't fully engaged with the risk and you're willing to pay the price. Some things come with the risk of death. You know, if you're a Formula One driver, true,
you've got the potential risk of a high, not just having an accident, but it changing your life forever. But you've just got to be engaged with that and decide, is it worth it? And I don't think I can say whether it's worth it or not for someone else. I think a lot of regret, in fact, we've talked about this before. There was some statistic, wasn't there, that most regret comes from inaction rather than action. And I think that's helpful for us to remember. Most people regret something that they don't do rather than something that they do that goes wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's so helpful to remember when we're assessing risk. So I think we've got to gauge the risk and think, am I making it bigger in my head, or am I being flippant and underestimating the risk in my head? And I'm speaking to people probably who are more like me that might increase the risk, but there are other people out there that do minimise risk, and they need a proper estimation as well. So that's some things that I think we need to do. I also think we need another little tool that you can do is you can imagine, maybe you're making a decision about something in the future. Should I do this thing in 6 months' time? A helpful tool is to imagine that thing is tomorrow. And if I'm saying yes to something 6 months away, how would I feel about it if it was tomorrow? So sometimes this is, maybe when somebody asks us to do something for them, we can gauge whether we should have said yes by how we'd feel if we suddenly had to do it tomorrow. And if our heart is sinking, then maybe that's not a good idea. Yeah. There's some other tactics we can use that I found these and I've kind of adapted them from something I was reading from a guy called Chris Gilbo. He said, flip a coin. Now, it sounds really ridiculous, but what he's saying there is, should I go for the job or should I stay put? If you flip a coin and heads is go for the job and tails is don't go for the job, how do you feel when you get the answer that you get?
That's
often we know.
Yeah. And I have, my husband uses this tool when we go out for dinner, and I say, I don't know whether to pick between this or this. Yeah. And he'll say, like, if you had this, how would you feel? And I'll be like, actually, I don't, I don't want to have that.
Exactly.
And it is such a good way to make the choice.
Yeah, it's like somebody saying, okay, well, head, you're having that. And then you go, oh, I don't think I do. It's an interesting one to get in touch with what your heart maybe is feeling about a situation. If you're disappointed with the thing that comes on the coin, then that is something to listen to.
Yeah.
So that's a really good little simple thing. Then the other thing to get someone to do is to get them to talk about all the possible decisions they could make, like take you through the options. So let's say there are 5 possible options. Listen to that person who's talking it through, or you be that person, ask someone to listen to you. Interestingly, what often happens is when we do this, we talk differently about the different options, and there's maybe a bit more animation around certain options than others, and we talk about it in a different way. Or it's almost like looking for someone's tell. You know, when people play poker and you can tell whether they're telling the truth or not. When you get someone to go through the options, there's normally a tell as to which one they actually want. On top of that, often the last thing is the one that we really want to do.
Sure.
It's just as simple as that. We tend to go, right, we could do this, but I could do this. And there's a bias towards that. So I think going through that process with a friend and getting them to reflect back to you, what did they hear? What did they notice? Or you being that friend to someone else, we often know more than we realise. And this comes from my experience of being a coach. When I'm coaching people and talking to them about career decisions, most of the time I'm listening to them and I'm thinking, you know already.
Yeah. I'm
just listening and I think, you know already. I'm giving you a bit of courage. I'm giving you a bit of clarity. I'm giving you the space to say this out loud. But actually, I'm just helping you get there.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this, you probably know. Yeah. Even if it's a tough decision and it's like, actually, I'm closing the door on that dream. It's not the right thing to do. You probably know you shouldn't. And you probably know you should.
Absolutely.
And then I think the thing I'd last say is to pick something and to commit to it. I think when we're in decision making, sometimes we just keep our options open and we're just left in limbo. We're left in limbo land. We're left in a stagnation. I had a friend who I used to work with, and when I started working with her, she said to me, I'm going to leave here soon. And it took her another 10 years to go. Honestly, that's not an exaggeration. And that was not picking and choosing and committing. That was being sure, being definite. And it wasn't because, she was in a very high risk situation. It really wasn't that. And I think there was something that Jack from This Is Us said, for those of us who've ever seen that show. I love This Is Us. And he said to he's talking to his boys, and he says to them, boys, own your choices and commit to them fully. And when you make a choice, you then just commit to it until it's time to make a change. Like, shut the other doors off. I've made a decision to stay, and I'm going to stay for a year. And so I'm going to stay in this job. I'm going to stay for a year. Everything else now, I'm closing off. Or I'm going to go, and I'm going to own that I've gone and release myself from the perfection of making the perfect choice, and instead commit to the choice I've made. Not sure there is a perfect choice out there in anything. True. There's the choice that we have. And the perfect thing to do is to commit fully and to go for it. And the last piece of advice I would give you is what Dr. Pepper said, which is, what's the worst that could happen?